Ash had been ahead of him at the time gate. If Ross had been jerked through to this pass, then somewhere in the water on the shore, Gordon was here too. But where to find him? Setting his back to the cliff and holding to the rough stone, Ross got to his feet, trying to see through the welter of foam and water. Not only the sea poured here, but a torrential rain fell into the bargain, streaming down about him, battering his head and shoulders. A chill rain which made him shiver. He wore gill pack, weighted belt with the sheathed tool and knife, flippers, and a pair of swimming trunks, which had been suitable for the Bacchae he knew. But this was a different world altogether. Dare he use his torch to see the way out of here? Ross watched the lights to the north, deciding they were not too unlike his own beam, and took the chance. Now he stood on a shelf of rock pitted with depressions, all pools. To his left was a drop into a boiling, whirling cauldron from which points of stone fanged. Ross shuddered. At least he had escaped being pulled into that. To his right, northward, there was another space of sea, a narrow strip, and then a second ledge. He measured the distance between that and the one on which he perched. Staying where he was would not locate Ash. Ross stripped off his flippers, made them fast in his belt. Then he leaped and landed painfully as his feet slipped and he skidded face down on the northern ledge. As he sat up, rubbing a bruised and scraped knee, he saw lights advancing in his direction, and between them a shadow crawling from water to shore. Ross stumbled along the ledge, hastening to reach that figure, who lay still now just out of the waves. Ash? Ross's limping pace became a trot, but he was too late. The other lights, two of them, had reached the shadow. A man, or at least a body which was humanoid, sprawled face down. Other men, three of them, gathered over the exhausted swimmer. Those who held the torches were still partially in the dark, but the third stooped to roll over their find. Ross caught the glint of light on a metallic head covering, the glisten of wet armor of some type on the fellow's back and shoulders as he made quick examination of the seized victim. Then Ross halted, his eyes wide. A hand rose and fell with expert precision. There had been a blade in that hand. Already the three were turning away from the man so ruthlessly dispatched. Ash, or some survivor of the wrecked ships? Ross retreated to the end of the ledge, the narrow stream of water dividing it from the rock where he had won ashore washed into a cave in the cliff. Dare he try to work his way into that? Masked with the gill pack, he could go undersurface if he were not smashed by the waves against some wall. He glanced back. The lights were very close to the end of his ledge. To withdraw to the second rock would mean being caught in a dead end, for he dared not enter the whirlpool on its far side. There was really no choice. Stay and be killed, or try for the cave. Ross fastened on his flippers and lowered his body into the narrow stream. The fact that it was narrow and guarded on either side by the ledges tamed the waves a little, and Ross found a tug against him not so great as he feared it would be. Keeping handholds on the rock, he worked along, head and shoulders often under the wash of rolling water, but winning steadily to the break in the cliff wall. Then he was through, into a space much larger than the opening, water-filled but not with a wild turbulence of waves. Had he been sighted? Ross kept a handhold to the left of that narrow entrance, his body floating with the rise and fall of the water. He could make out the gleam of light without. It might be that one of those hunters had leaned out over the runnel of the cave entrance, was flashing his torch down into the water there. Behind mask plate, Ross's lips writhed in a snarl of the hunted. In here he would have the advantage. Let one of them, or all three, try to follow through that rock entrance and... But if he had been sighted at the mouth of the lair, none of his trackers appeared to wish to press the hunt. The light disappeared, and Ross was left in the dark. He counted 100 slowly, and then a second 100 before he dared use his own torch. For all its slit entrance, this was a good-sized hideaway he had chanced upon, and he discovered, when he ventured to release his wall hold and swim out into the middle, the bottom arose in a slope towards its rear. Moments later, Ross pulled out of the water once more, to crouch shivering on a ledge only lapped now and then by wavelets. He had found a temporary refuge, but his good fortune did not quiet his fears. Had that been ash on the shore? And why had the swimmer been so summarily executed by the men who found him? The ships caught on the reef, the castle on the cliff above his head, enemies, ship's crews, and castle men. But the callous act of the shore patrol argued a state of war carried to fanatic proportions, perhaps interracial conflict. He could not hope to explore until the storm was over. To plunge back into the sea would not find ice, and to be hunted along the shore by an unknown enemy was simply asking to die without achieving any good in return. No, he must remain where he was for the present. Ross unhooked the torch from his belt and used it on this higher portion of the cave. He was perched on a ledge which protruded into the water in the form of a wedge. At his back, the wall of the cave was rough, and trails of weed were festooned on its projections. The smell of fishy decay was strong enough to register as Ross pulled off his mask. As far as he could now see, there was no exit except by sea. A movement in the water brought his light flashing down into the dark flood. Then a sleek head arose in the path of that ray. Not a man swimming, but one of the dolphins. Ross's exclamation of surprise was half gasp, half cry. The second dolphin showed for a moment, and between the shadow of their bodies, just under the surface, moved a third form. Ash? Ross had no idea how the dolphins had come through the time gate, but that they had guided to safety a Terran he did not doubt at all. Ash? But it was not Ash who came wading to the ledge where Ross waited with hand outstretched. He had been so sure of the other's identity that he blinked in complete bewilderment as his eyes met Carwa's, and she half stumbled, half reeled against him. His arms about her shoulders steadied her, and her shivering body was close to his as she leaned her full weight upon him. Her hands made a feeble movement to her mask, and he pulled it off. Uncovered, her face was pale and drawn, her eyes now closed, and her breath came in ragged, tearing sobs, which shook her even more. "How did you get here?" Ross demanded, even as he pushed her down on the ledge. Her head moved slowly in a weak gesture of negation. "I don't know. We were close to the gate. There was a flash of light. Then..." Her voice sealed up with a note of hysteria in it. "Then I was here, and Tara with me. Tina Raw came. Ross! Ross! There was a man swimming. He got ashore. He was getting to his feet and they killed him." Ross's hold tightened. He stared into her face with a fierce demand. "Was it Gordon?" She blinked, brought her hand up to her mouth, and wiped it back and forth across her chin. There was a small red trickle growing between her fingers, dripping down her arm. "Gordon!" She repeated it as if she had never heard the name before. "Yes. Did they kill Gordon?" In his grasp, she was swaying back and forth. Then, realizing he was shaking her, Ross got himself under control. But a measure of understanding had come into her eyes. "No, not Gordon. Where is Gordon?" "You haven't seen him?" Ross persisted, knowing it was useless. "Not since we were at the gate." Her words were less slurred. "Weren't you with him?" "No, I was alone." "Ross, where are we?" "Better say, when are we?" he replied. "We're through the gate and back in time, and we have to find Gordon." He did not want to think of what might have happened out on the shore.